You know, since I'm the freight queen, Michelle, don't worry, because freight moves by multiple modes. So this morning I'm going to move by air. So I'm going to be air cargo, fast, furious. But yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit today about not necessarily what I generally present on, which is the freight plan to freight plan. It's more like get to know us better. That's the presentation really today. What does my group do within TxDOT that fits into what you know, was talked about? Stacy, you know, talked about, you know, oh my goodness, Tanya and Michelle talked about how that all fits together, and the rest of the things you're going to hear later today, how this fits into the whole big picture. So a little bit about what we do. You know, within TxDOT, we're called FIT. So if you see me exercising a little bit here, because that's what our name is. But FIT is Freight and International Trade. You know, within the TPP, within the Transportation Planning and Programming. So a little bit here, what you see on the screen is really our role is to integrate freight into all facets of TxDOT, whether it's planning, programming, implementation. We work with every single division, district, to interject freight in everything from planning, like I mentioned, till, you know, operating and managing and maintaining the system. And then, you know, really some of the key initiatives, I'll talk a little bit more later, but you can see some of them here, you know, mentioned earlier, the Freight Mobility Plan. That was one of the key initiatives we've done over the last 3 years, is developing the first comprehensive multimodal freight mobility plan for the state of Texas. And I'll touch on a little bit later. But other initiatives are also border-related initiatives, which we've kind of vamped up our efforts in that, and I'll touch on those a little bit later as well. You heard mention of FAST Act, you know, Federal Transportation Bill. A big component of FAST Act was freight. It was the first time we have a national transportation bill that had a key component just focusing on freight. We have several, you know, freight-related provisions in the FAST Act that I'll touch on again later throughout my presentation. So kind of give you a, you know, a good idea of the two components that we focus on as FIT section within, you know, TPP, and within TxDOT. We kind of have, you know, freight planning and border planning, but they're not necessarily two separate. They kind of, you know, twine with each other because a lot of border issues are freight issues, and goods movement planning, freight planning issues, you know, touch on border issues. So some of the key things I mentioned already, the freight mobility plan, and then also, you know, Tanya talked a little bit about, you know, assessing advisory committee. My group runs two committees, one on the freight side, the Freight Advisory Committee, and then the other one on the border side, the Border Trade Advisory Committee. And just to mention about the committees, we did our summer newsletter. It highlighted just the committees that we manage, or at least we liaison with within the department. So if you go on the website, with our show later, you can actually see all the committees described in details, their role, then also our role, and why they're important in our planning process. And as I mentioned again, FAST Act, several provisions in the FAST Act related to freight. MAP 21 freight plans were not required, but under FAST Act, freight plans, state DOTs are required to develop freight plans. So without a freight plan, there's some consequences in terms of getting federal dollars. Also, we have two funding parts. One is a formula fund. Generally, that's funds that, you know, it's not new money in this case, money that would normally come to us, that now they've been carved for freight projects. And those projects have to be generated from, you know, a freight plan, a FAST Act compliant freight plan. Then also there's a discretionary grant program. That's a new program under FAST Act, you know, competitive program nationwide, that now it's something that we have to kind of be at the table and submit grant applications so that we can be able to leverage some of that funding. And then also a key component of our work is a lot of outreach. Do a lot of outreach. A lot of you know me for being kind of the road warrior. And a lot of that is really just reaching out to stakeholders throughout the state, but also nationwide, to make sure that we're kind of staying abreast of what's going on, whether it's at the federal level, throughout other states, and in my case, the border. You know, and then also we do, you know, some corridor studies. You hear that. We coordinate a lot with our corridor planning team that you hear from them later. And then specifically on the border side, again, as I mentioned earlier, this is one area that we're really vamping up our efforts. And as you see here, we have we have the Border Trade Advisory Committee, but also we have binational committees, which I'll talk about later. We have the Joint Working Committee on Transportation Planning. Then we have the U.S.-Mexico Borders, Bridges, and Border Crossings Group that we also participate in that. And then also we participate in a lot of other areas, but I think another key one is presidential permits. A lot of people don't realize, when there's a bridge being built between the U.S. and Mexico or U.S. and Canada, there has to be a presidential permit, in place for that bridge to be built. So it's not a regular project we do, within the state. So as I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of work with different divisions and districts, and this will show you some of the things we're doing, with the districts, and this is continual, throughout literally almost every day. We are touching some district or some division in one form or another, regardless of what the issue is. So again, wanted to highlight that, we're kind of the in-between. I say we're always like the cheese between the bread within the agency. I mentioned committees, so the next few slides I'll highlight some of the key committees that, one, we directly manage, and then two, the international one that we participate in. The main one is the Freight Advisory Committee. This was created back in 2013, and really at that time, the main goal of the committee, creating the committee, was to help us develop the Freight Mobility Plan. And this committee was very instrumental in really helping us understand the issues that are facing the freight industry in Texas, but also help us kind of develop the strategies moving forward, which I'll talk a little bit about later, really the implementation of some of the strategies that the committee helped us come up with. Chaired by Judge Emmett, very well known in the state and nationally. He's one of probably the best freight champion I've ever met, throughout my career. And he's been very dedicated to the process and really got a lot of credibility, again, from leaders within the state. And also he was very instrumental in really bringing together some of the most instrumental and key stakeholders across the state. Big names. You got HEB, you got the Trucking Association, we're one of probably very few states that have all three Class 1 railroads on our committee. And they've been very, very active throughout the process and continue to be. My counterparts from other states can't really tell you that they have the railroads participating actively in their process. And then the next one is the Border Trade Advisory Committee. This is a little bit of an older committee, and it was statutorily created in 2001, and really was created to help the state, help Texas and TxDOT understand border issues, because again, we share the longest border with Mexico compared to all the other four border states on the southern border. And then Mexico is our #1 trading partner for Texas, but also for U.S. So we have a lot in common with Mexico, and Mexico has a lot of impact on our economy. So this committee was created really to help us understand that, but also to help us articulate what the transportation needs are to facilitate efficient flow of trade between U.S. and Mexico, so in Texas. The committee is chaired by the Secretary of State, which currently is Secretary Cascos, and that's how the committee was created. It's chaired by the Secretary of State, but is managed and staffed by TxDOT. So there's a really interesting dichotomy, in this committee. The Transportation Commission picks and appoints committee members, in consultation with the Secretary of State. So it's a little bit unique in that regard. But over the last year, the committee has been very active, and one of the key things that they're working on, for the first time, this committee is going to be developing a strategic border blueprint or a roadmap to really highlight what are the strategic issues that are facing the Texas-Mexico border, what are some of the strategic directions or recommendations or strategies that we need to put forth, to really address border issues. And this report, we're anticipating will be done sometimes next year, summer, or before summer next year, and it's going to be presented to the governor, it's going to be presented to the legislators, so we're kind of a little bit under the gun to get that. The secretary is needing the interim report by December so he can present it to the legislators. So a really big undertaking. The committee has met 3 times already this year, and the next meeting is in December. So really, very instrumental. Our border issues are kind of hot right now, regardless of what you hear in the news about the wall. That's not what, really we're focusing on. We're focusing on trade, we're focusing on economy, we're focusing really on the movement of goods. The next 2, committees are binational in nature, and the first one is the U.S. Joint Working Committee on Transportation Planning. Again, this is a binational committee which, you have, representative from the U.S., representative from Mexico, federal, state, and local level. And really the goal is to talk about transportation planning issues. This is where we talk about, trade flows, we talk about data, we talk about modeling, we talk about sharing a lot of this information between the 2 countries, but also the border states are very, very instrumental in these meetings. And as you can see, really the purpose of the committee and some of the events and activities, there's a work plan developed every year that really guides the Joint Working Committee. And then this is some of the things that we've done, by us participating in the Joint Working Committee. These are some of the things we've done. The Texas Border Master Plan, some of you were involved in that several years ago, where really, came as a result of us participating in the Joint Working Committee. And we're, going to be updating the Border Master Plan. It's really a key component of our border planning process, or a tool, a plan that is going to help direct that. Some of the other, areas we've done border wait time studies. We continue to do that. Partnering with TTI on that, as was mentioned yesterday. Really, the partnership between TxDOT and TTI really comes very prominent in some of the areas that we do work with them. And border wait time is really, again, we were kind of the innovators of border wait times, and now it's been adopted by all the other border states on the southern border, really to look at congestion issues at the border. We're talking about border crossings. Again, when you hear congestion, a lot of times people just think about urban areas. But it's real at the border. When you go to places like Laredo and a truck is, queued and waiting for 3 hours, it's very challenging because that's very costly to the industry. Then the binational borders and bridges crossing group, again, the JWC is more planning related. The BBXG is primarily about the border crossings themselves, who builds, who maintains, and who runs the actual crossing. They're not necessarily concerned with the transportation approaches to and out of the bridges. It's just the border crossing where you get inspected if you cross the border. So this group is primarily focused on that. Again, it's binational. You have both U.S. and Mexican officials and stakeholders involved in this. And the group generally meets once in the U.S. and once in Mexico. And then some of the border projects that I wanted to highlight here, which is really important and I think is really kind of strategic on our part, is TxDOT is in the process of building and owning the first border crossing a bridge, which is Presidio Bridge. And then also we're in the process of rebuilding a rail bridge that was burnt down several years ago by fire. So again, our role is increasing when it comes to really, facilitating trade flows between Texas and Mexico. And then some of the border projects, I already mentioned the Border Master Plan. We're looking at, developing the Texas Border Transportation Blueprint with the Border Trade Advisory Committee. And then also we're going to be looking at joint, corridor studies with the Mexicans, looking at some of the key trade corridors and what are the challenges on both sides. So I think that's critical because a lot of times when we talk about the border, we just talk about the point, which is the border crossing itself, the gateway. We don't talk about the corridors that lead to and from the border. And then on the freight side, we have accomplished or developed the freight mobility plan, but also unknown to a lot of people, we developed a freight corridor study or freight corridor plan for I-45. And really for I-45, most of you know, really links the Port of Houston and the inland port in Dallas. So it was really, upon us to understand what the issues and challenges are in that corridor. So that's one of the things that we did. We also are in the process of completing looking at oversized, overweight vehicles traveling on our roadways. So in the process of completing that, TTI has been the lead on that. And then looking at travel information systems related specifically to freight. Again, that's a key area that we've found out during the freight plan development process, providing information to the trucking industry, to the freight industry, so that they can, make informed decisions. So TTI is helping us with that as well. And then also another area TTI is helping us with is looking at strategies to address freight bottlenecks and freight congestion in our urban areas in the Texas Triangle. So those are some of the initiatives we're doing on the freight side. So quickly on the freight plan. Where are we today? Kind of what the freight plan is. A lot of you have heard me speak about this, what the freight plan is. So I won't dwell on that. The freight plan quickly identified several challenges and issues, and then the freight plan identified, kind of strategies to implement or address those issues. And there were 3 buckets. We had programs, we had policies, programs, and projects. And, in terms of projects, the plan identified over 1,200 projects, as you can see here, highway being the biggest slice. But what's interesting in terms of implementation is really looking at, on the highway side, what have we done since the freight plan was adopted? So you can see we've actually started implementing the freight plan in terms of on the highway side, whereby, by this fiscal year 2017, Laura, if you add 16 and 17, we're looking at a 25% implementation rate. This is a project that are going to letting. And what's critical about this is because when we started developing the freight plan, the underlying guiding principle was not to go and create projects, but to identify projects that are in the UTP that you hear about later, that are freight-centric projects and projects that were kind of ready to go. So as you see here that, that strategy is actually working whereby we're implementing freight-centric projects fairly quickly and showing some progress and showing some results, which is one of the things that we really wanted to demonstrate to the freight industry, the stakeholders, that this plan is going to be an action-oriented plan that's implementable, that we can show results to the industry so that their time is not wasted when they come to the table and spend 2-3 years to help us develop the plan. And then I mentioned the FAST Act, and I mentioned the formula funds. Again, there's whole detailed information. I'm not going to go into that, but for the next 5 years, Texas has about $100 million in formula funds. Again, these are not new funds. This was funds that were already coming to Texas, but they curved it for freight. So we have to submit projects to Federal Highway, US DOT every year that meet the criteria. And here's the criteria for FY16. We submitted 10 projects, and we're going to be doing that every fiscal year moving forward. And then in terms of the freight plan, I mentioned that FAST Act came with new guidance and for the freight plan and now requiring a freight plan, but also requiring us to update the freight plan to meet FAST Act requirements. So this is the 3 kind of key components that we have to do to update our freight plan within literally the next 12 months. And one is we have to include critical rural freight corridors and also include critical urban freight corridors. And then the freight plan has to be financially constrained. Our freight plan, the current one, is MAP 21 compliant, but it's not necessarily, fiscally constrained because we have projects there that are not fully funded. So when you hear about a fiscal constraint, all the projects in the freight plan have to be fully funded, all portions of that. So really my final slide here is kind of just, again, a lot of this I've talked about, but showing you some of the new programs that we're, facilitating within the department. And a lot of it has to do with the federal requirements. Tanya talked about performance measures. That's something that we've not necessarily focused on the freight side for a long time, but now there's very specific requirements, reporting requirements, and that we have to do. So again, a lot is mandatory now when it comes to freight planning at state DOT. So we're going to be focusing on that. But as I mentioned too, our border efforts, we have a lot of initiatives underway to address border issues. So with that, you can go to the website, movetexasfreight.com, and there's a wealth of information in there. And then, here are my staff within the FIT section, that if you have any questions or you can't get a hold of me, you can definitely get a hold of them. Thank you.